Can we start? How are you all? My name is Sunil Saleem. I thank each one of you for your esteemed presence today here for this interesting session. And I'm really privileged, I really mean it, to have this opportunity to talk on the BIG5 platform. I want to thank Mr. Dan Tapscott and Alex Tapscott, the founders of Blockchain Research Institute and the authors of the famous book, Blockchain Revolution, for their tremendous efforts to bring this technology to the world stage. And when I met Alex early this April, I told him that just like me, there are a lot of people as friends whom they have inspired to get into this arena. And finally, let me thank Mr. Juvan and Associates who have made a brilliant research of application of blockchain technology on the construction domain. It's not a surprise that construction has been traditionally lagging behind adopting digital transformation because of the fact that we have been happy to do things on the old way. So when I search for case studies that has adopted blockchain on the construction, I could not really find anything. There is plenty of works, successful stories on the finance, on insurance, on healthcare, on education, and there are most of the industries, but very few on construction. So I thought it's time for the construction professionals to take it a fast pace and get along with other industries. Our key theme of today's discussion is really walking through 4 phases. Before we move on, can we have an idea how many of us have a fairly good knowledge about blockchain? Can you raise your hands? Okay, that's great. For the sake of starters, we will still walk through some fundamentals of blockchain technology, and then we will examine some of the pain points what construction industry is facing that can be addressed through the help of blockchain. And finally, some of the challenges perceived in implementing the technology. Ronald Coase was a Nobel Prize winner many decades ago, and he has posed an interesting question. What's the purpose of existence for an organization? And he found the essence of this purpose is to reduce transaction costs. For a business to survive, it needs to acquire a lot of resources. And if you don't have these resources in-house, you have to acquire them from an external source. And dealing with any external sources incurs a lot of transaction costs. And at the heart of the transaction cost comes from the trust, establishment of trust. So he says, in order to avoid the cost of transaction, every businesses try to induce every single resources as much as they can in order to reduce the transaction cost. So the significance of blockchain comes from the fact that trust is at the heart of every business transaction. Now, let's go to some fundamentals about blockchain. The last few decades, we have seen the emergence of internet technology, and we are living with it, just like we breathe. The World Wide Web and the email, the applications of internet, have enabled transfer of data, information, files seamlessly. And the problem that if I have to send you an information, if it's a file, let's say a PowerPoint or PDF or a text file, I'm really sending you a copy, not the original, because I'm still retaining the original with me. Now, if I want to send you $100 and still I'm keeping the original with me, it makes no sense. So this problem has been called the double spending problem. And over the last few decades, cryptographers around the world have been trying to find solutions for this. Then, in 2008, we had the financial industry crash. Just by coincidence, that year, an anonymous person or persons by the name Satoshi Nakamoto have came up with a research paper. This paper was introducing a cryptocurrency called Bitcoin and the underlying technology, which was the blockchain. And the double spending problem has been completely addressed in that research paper because of the cryptocurrency operating model. And they have called it the trust protocol. So, how this network operates? What is the foundation of blockchain network? It is basically a distributed ledger, a vast distributed ledger, lying on hundreds of thousands of computers, or called nodes, across the globe. If a transaction takes place in the blockchain network, it has been validated by a group of people or volunteers called miners. What is the incentive for miners? The first person who validates that transaction is being compensated by a cryptocurrency, in this case, Bitcoin. Can anyone know the current price of Bitcoin? 3,900 as of today. And can anyone knows what was the price last year around this time? Louder. Yeah, it was above $15,000. So there was a drastic fluctuation in the pricing. But the good news about it, the miners are getting huge rewards of their work. Now the computing power of the entire blockchain network is estimated to be higher than the capacity of Google server. So the miners are validating the work, and that's called the proof of work. Once it's validated, the block is added to the existing chain of blocks. Once it is added to the block, it is practically impossible to hack. It's called immutability. Now, if I make a transaction across the blockchain, and if a hacker tries to hack it, how is it possible? Is there any chance, technically? The possibility of hacking is simply you have to hack or modify the information on the block that has been just created, and the previous block, and the previous block, and across the entire chain of blocks that is lying on every single computer on the blockchain network simultaneously. So that is close to impossible. An anomaly for that is just like you make a chicken back from nuggets. Do you think it's possible? Making a chicken, you get the nuggets and you make a chicken back from the nuggets. Now, the popular brands or faces of blockchain today. We have already talked about the Bitcoin. A university dropout from Toronto, his name is Vitalik Buterin. He has created another blockchain platform called Ethereum, and they have their own cryptocurrency called Ether. The speciality of Ethereum that they were the first one who introduced the smart contracts. We are going to talk a lot about smart contracts later in this talk. So Ethereum is another brand of blockchain. We have the Hyperledger, created by Linux Foundation. The most popular blockchains has been traditionally permissionless open platforms. But on the enterprise level, for organizations, in order to have their own private blockchain system, Hyperledger have found the solution. So they are the front runners in that context. Now, about Mycelia. Traditionally, most of those people who have been working in the entertainment industry and creative workers like a songwriter or a painter, for example, they have been suffering from a problem, the problem of intermediaries. So they were poorly compensated, and all the fortune has been made by the intermediaries. If you write a song, you are getting a very low compensation, and the intermediary who buys it from you is really getting the benefit as long as the song gets popular. So blockchain brought an end to this plight. They were able to deal directly with the end users and the users of their creative work. And Mycelia brought a platform for that. So every piece of artwork is entered into a smart contract, and those users who want to access it will be immediately paid through the cryptocurrency. Ripple and R3 are platforms for financial transactions, basically created by a consortium of financial institutions. There is two kind of classifications in general, the permissionless and the permissioned one, and private and public. At one end of the spectrum, we have the public permissionless blockchain, such as the Bitcoin blockchain. Possibly anybody can join to that network and start doing the mining right from now. On the other end of the spectrum, we have the private permissioned blockchain, which is mostly used by organizations. And there is a third category, the hybrid type, which we are going to discuss again when we go to the supply chain network, which can be utilized by a group of institutions together with different privileges. There is some numbers. These numbers are not updated. It's about last year. $450 million has been invested in blockchain organizations by the US. 66% of large organizations say they expect to incorporate blockchain technology by 2018. And 60 billion potential generated savings expected from blockchain implementation. Most of this data is derived from financial industry. If you see the array of emerging technologies that has been transforming the business, the blockchain is still remaining on the lower half. Technologies such as data analytics and artificial intelligence are leading the pack, but I believe within the next 5 years, blockchain will be one of the front runners in that aspect. The good news for us here, 100% of government services and transactions in Dubai will use blockchain technology by 2020. Okay. The blockchain application, I think this is the last slide on the blockchain. The blockchain applications can be categorized broadly as two types, static and dynamic. The static types basically solve the problems related to digital identity, land title deeds, and all those static information, the KYC for the banks and all those static information. On the other side, we have the dynamic part, which is dealing with the transactions of financial institutions, and in the middle we have the smart contract, which have both elements. It have got a transaction part and it have got certain static part. All right. Are we good to go for the pain points? Okay. We will deal three areas that the construction industry have been suffering from some aspects that can be potentially addressed through blockchain. Every construction project consists of a network of perhaps hundreds of companies dealing at different levels, and every single company have some kind of interactions, as we say, transactions, and every transaction have a cost and an element of trust. Because of the unique nature of a project, by definition, a project is unique, right? So every single project have its own element of uniqueness. So it's close to impossible that we'll have the whole set of organizations will be working in one project and again in the next project. So every time you have to establish kind of trust relationship when you go for a new project. There is no way that you have a long-term relationship with every 100 companies. Perhaps you are working on project A and project B. So this incurs the complexity of establishing trust. And this is again dealt with the multitude of contracts. The elements of contracts, again, that there is no contract in place where there are gray areas. So, as we have seen in the previous presentation, my colleague, he spoke a lot about the claims. And even I have been working on claims many times and succeeded in getting claims from the client with some cost of lost trust. But the problem of a contract is that every entity is interpreting a contract in certain ways, and the dispute arises when the interpretation have a conflict of interest. If everybody is on the same page across the project life cycle, the contract is interpreted 100% in the same way, there is no claims and litigations takes place. So by establishing a trust-based system, we are going to eliminate all these pains. Supply chain management. We can see there are at least 6 pain points here, starting from the raw material suppliers all the way to the construction site. Now, when we talk about transparency and traceability, of course in the supply chain, it's a bilateral relationship. It's a sequence of bilateral relationships existing between all these companies that are taking place in the whole network. So at every relationship, there is an element of uncertainty. And we used to have information systems, brilliant systems in place, such as all those types of ERP systems. The limitation of an ERP system that it is owned and maintained by any one of the parties, typically the owner of the project or the contractor or any party. So it is practically impossible that all the rest of the parties are having the same level of trust in the ERP system of another company. So transparency is something that we are currently missing. Traceability and provenance, it is kind of a mixed topic. Some of the raw materials, the source are really important because of quality and regulatory purposes. If you have a system that can track back all the way back to the raw materials, it is nearly impossible today. And again, even if you have all the information available on the information system, there is a lack of trust existing. If a logistic company in the network tell you that the material is going to deliver after 30 days, I'm sure 99% will get a call the last week of that 30 days seeking for an extension. The third category is asset management. Asset management has been typically handled by most of the companies using their own information systems. And if you have a cluster of companies doing together this asset management, operational maintenance, you will really have a problem of interoperability of their systems. So if you have one single system and one single version of truth or status, that will eliminate a lot of hassles in the asset management domain. Okay, so we are going to talk about some potential scenarios that can be solved using the blockchain technology. The first one is notarization. Every construction project have huge volume of documents, and document control is one of the functions in any project. The documentation involves generation of the document, dissemination of the document, getting approvals from different places, from government authorities, from regulatory authorities, and then if you want to make a change, any change in the requirement, for instance, you have to make that change in the design, and that will be reflected across the entire process. So what if there is a distributed ledger system where everybody have equal access and can make the changes, and everybody are on the same page, and submission of the information and approval of the information on the other side will happen with everybody's consent, everybody's knowledge. There is no gray areas. The other part is about submission of reports. We typically have daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, or annual reports. All this kind of reports, what if you can submit online? And it's not, I'm not talking about the conventional information systems that we have in the project management. It's about a system that everybody have equal privilege. Everybody owns the system. There is not a single owner. And then they can access the information, and there is a trust of that status. There is no ambiguity. The second one is transaction. Payments, it's a big issue. I think there was a speech yesterday about the payment problems in the construction industry in the region. Now, payment, and we are going to talk about a smart contract that enforces payment. Payment that happens across all those interrelations, and ownership, transfer of ownership. And all these kind of transactions can be uploaded on a blockchain and can be enforced automatically. The provenance related go back to the supply chain. So the person sitting at the owner's office, if you want to check the origin of the material he got, where was it from? Let's say we have a complaint happened after the project was handed over. Let's talk about a power system, and there was a complaint discovered. And by troubleshooting, they find that the problem comes from the battery. If you have a system to trace back, and they can find perhaps the defect comes from the lithium material. The material is originated from some land which has been not approved to get the lithium. This is the kind of the depth of information that we can trace back on a supply chain. Okay, so we will examine 3 applications now. We check some scenarios, now we will check some applications where blockchain can bring value. So in the contract management, we are trying to find a smart contract on Ethereum. The typical architecture of a smart contract is something like this. Every contract have an ID, every transaction have an ID, and all the terms and conditions are coded. This is the beauty of it. All terms and conditions are coded and immutable. So there is nobody have an upper hand in the contract on administration, on monitoring, and making any changes. So let's say, for example, according to the project milestone, there is a payment due when you complete floor number 10. So once the contractor acknowledges that milestone has been achieved and validated by the consultant, then the payment is due. So there is no way for the paying party to hold the payment. The contract will enforce the payment, and the payment will be released automatically. Not only that, there will be a series of payments subsequently happening in the network, which is due for the subcontractors, which has to be paid by the main contractor and the suppliers and all those distributors. So the entire system of supply chain are paid on time based on a smart contract. Contract administration, as we said, there is no upper hands for anybody on holding the contract or interpreting the terms and conditions, and this is eliminating a lot of efforts and paperwork in terms of contract administration. Most of the companies these days, they employ a group of lawyers in-house, or they seek the help of a third party, law firm, for handling their litigations and disputes to achieve the claims. I had a friend of mine who is working independently as a claims consultant, and every time when he wins a claim, he calls me and offers me a party. And he told me that it's a win-win. I am getting money, my client is getting money. So what's the point? I told him, what about his client? And what about the damaged relationship? So avoiding claims will eliminate, I think, the single biggest headache in any contract. Now, we will examine a case from a supply chain network. We are talking about a prefabricated equipment which has to be installed on a construction site. So, assuming that all parties, starting from the project owner up to the raw material supplier, are part of the supply chain network. Once the request has been originated from the owner, it goes to the material supplier, and the material inspection has been done by a third party which validates the quality of the material, and then it goes to the manufacturer to design and fabricate the product. Once it is completed, again the further inspection will be carried by the third party. That will alert the logistic company, the shipper, to take his course of action. And at any point of time, the status of the material in transit can be monitored by every party in the blockchain. There is no way that there is an ambiguity for somebody in the network. And here is the case that we mentioned about the hybrid kind of blockchain. I think you see the next slide. Yeah. It's called the federated blockchain. So here we have a cluster of companies in the blockchain. So if you have a supply chain that comes with a group of companies, everybody have to be part of the same blockchain, which is permissioned with same access, but it's a private one. It's not just supply chain management. We have some other cases here. Example: financial services, insurance claims, multi-party. Okay. The third case about asset management, and we take an example of an equipment leasing. By the way, this is an original application developed by IBM based on hypervector fabric. We know that these days construction requires a lot of heavy equipment, cranes, scaffoldings, earth movers, excavators, all those. And it makes no sense for someone to have all this equipment all the time to possess. So that's where the leasing comes to existence. And when you have a material to lease, you still have traditionally to go through a lot of paperwork, negotiations, insurance, and transfer of ownership, temporary ownership. When we have a blockchain in place, the manufacturer of the cranes, the owner of the cranes, can enter all the information about those equipment to the system with the specifications and the ID. If a contractor comes to lease an equipment, he can look at the system and see which one is suiting his requirement. He makes the request, and they do all the transactions on the supply chain, the blockchain network, and the transfer of ownership will be transferred temporarily. And once the crane is under operation, the operation status also can be monitored by all parties. And at the end of the contract, the ownership can be returned back with all necessary payment transactions. So here we have seen 3 applications, and I think we are going to see a lot more areas in construction where blockchain can bring tremendous value. Now, we are perceiving not a smooth ride. There will be a lot of challenges. Few of them are listed here. Technical challenges basically comes from the system, the first one. A blockchain can currently accommodate 7 transactions per second, and validation of all transactions are carried out in the form of a heartbeat at every 10 minutes. If you have hundreds of thousands of transactions happening on a network, you cannot afford to have this kind of delay. The throughput have to be improved, which is a technical limitation at the moment. Second one, it requires huge resources in terms of electrical power and computing power. as we said, the combined power of blockchain, Bitcoin blockchain, is higher than that of the Google server. So these are technical, some of the technical limitations. Construction business-related limitations are traditionally about the laziness of the industry in general to adopt any digitization. So when the people have some kind of inertia to move to an automated system, that adds more pain to the transformation. Human-related issues are basically the technology is still very new, and most of the people are not really aware of this technology. People's resistance to change in general has been a crucial element in adopting, in resisting the change in any digital transformation project, not just in construction, and that equally applies to blockchain innovation as well. About the return of investment, we have seen the supply chain network, for example. There is a group of companies, and if you need to operate a blockchain-enabled supply chain management system, that means you have to invest. All the participating companies have to invest a unique blockchain for that purpose. And due to the uniqueness of the project, once that project is over, there is no point to keep the same system. So there is a hesitation of companies to invest in such a network for one single project purpose. Secondly, the last few decades we have seen implementation of ERP systems by most of the companies, and they have already made good investment in that aspect. So they will have a hesitation to totally come out of that new implemented ERP system and moving to another technology. And finally, BIM technology, which is taking place huge strides in the construction right now, can be added with more value if it incorporated with blockchain. Let's just take an example. During the design and construction phase of a project, which is handled through BIM technology, the privileges, access privileges to modify the data can be negotiated using a smart contract, which can be incorporated with the BIM network. And we are basically having a trusted information BIM system. This has been a study by Deloitte and MIT Sloan about the digital maturity index across all the industries. And there is no surprise that financial sector, IT, ICT, all of them are lying at the top. Can anyone see what is construction? We are first, starting from the bottom. So this has been generally the case of construction industry in adopting digital technologies, and blockchain will be no different. But what we have seen is that everything will be based on the thought process that we are limiting ourselves. The construction industry has been limiting its boundaries by the way they have been doing business in the past few centuries. So the paradigm shift has to happen in such a way that it will radically disrupt the industry. We have been talking about other emerging technologies such as artificial intelligence, robotics, machine learning, IoT, and all those. There is no doubt all those technologies are going to improve the existing process and performance of the industry or from all the industries. But to me, blockchain is different. It's not going to just improve the processes. It is going to totally redefine the businesses, the model of doing business. It has been a pleasure having this conversation with you, and I think I have helped to add some value to your information. Thank you so much. Thank you. We have Q&A time. Yeah, we have 10 minutes. Which one? Okay. So I have the cards anyway. I can share with you.
Can you hear me? All right. Thank you. This is great. I'm actually looking at this as we speak at the Coinbase, which is the application to buy Bitcoin and other cryptocurrency.
Make it louder, please.
Okay. Better now?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm looking at this app, which it's called Coinbase, where you can buy cryptocurrency. And the price of Bitcoin as we speak is $3,600-ish, which is by far less than what the expected value is, which to the crowd says that blockchain is getting less traction, maybe less adoption, maybe different. What do you think? I mean, how strong is it going to go into the construction industry from your presentation and those? It's getting less adopted by the day, which of course is a global market thing, but at the same time it's adoption into industry.
Well, thank you for the question. I think we have to see these two things differently. Bitcoin has been the front word, and cryptocurrencies in general is one part of the blockchain technology. And our point of discussion here is about construction, which is the application of blockchain on anything and everything apart from the cryptocurrency part. Blockchain has come to existence because of Bitcoin, but it has evolved a lot more today. Now, price of Bitcoin is subject to a lot of parameters that is happening across the world economies, but it's totally different from what we have to see in the application of blockchain in other domains. Maybe what's more applicable for us to discuss is not about Bitcoin, but about the evolvement of new technologies that's using blockchain. So Linux Foundation, now it's leading a consortium of companies, has established Hyperledger, which is basically the foundation of most of the blockchain on the enterprise level. The Ripple and R3 are again founded by consortiums. I think all the leading companies like Microsoft, IBM are part of this consortium, and it's growing day by day. I think it's more than 100 companies right now. So there is a lot of developments taking place, and even researches are being made. And I think these are just the most popular names. We have a lot more other systems. Within the Hyperledger platform, we have called Hyperledger Fabric, Hyperledger Sawtooth, and I don't recall all of those names. Even cryptocurrencies, apart from Ether and Bitcoin, there are some other. There is a cryptocurrency only for the Ripple. I don't recall the name. So we have to really differentiate between cryptocurrency and application of blockchain. Hope I answered. Thanks.
Yeah. Hello.
Yes, please.
Yeah. As far as blockchain, of course, it has got a potential in every sector, and like you said, UAE is implementing by 2020. The blockchain is unlike ERP, where someone can have an ERP and implement for their supply chain, for their business. But whereas the blockchain is not like that. Somebody has to create a platform. For example, if the UAE government is doing it, it is for their activity of like property registration or transactions or whatever it is. The government which is creating a blockchain and creating a platform of blockchain where the registry is happening. Okay. In the private sector, the financial sector, yes, you can still, there's a, it's a very organized structure, it can happen. But when it comes to the private sector and the other sectors, and even in the construction, who will do it? It's a question of so many integrated, stakeholders are there, and who will own and create a platform which is a trustable and built on it that everybody uses on it. That's the big question, the biggest challenge. For example, ERP, I have in our company, if you have an ERP, okay, all the related things we are linked, and who is not linked doesn't matter. We are only using the off and offline, online, whatever is implemented by the companies for their benefit, not for the benefit of the third party. It's only the information it is. But blockchain is not like that. Everybody needs to be on the board. But who creates the general platform? That's the big challenge which is going to be in the.
That's a good observation. But what we have seen in Dubai, for instance, most of the emerging technologies, starting from smart technologies, IoT, artificial intelligence, every single technology that is emerging has been first adopted by the government, and they have really demonstrated the benefit of adopting that technology. After which the private sector is getting the confidence to implement it, and they will really think about the return of investment. So if we come to blockchain technology, typically an organization or a group of organizations that comes in the group of companies can think about implementing. Depends on where they're gonna get the benefit of. Of course, as you said, somebody has to take an initiative. So if we have a construction project, for instance, let's say a government funded project, the client, which is the government authority, have to take the initiative that let's do this project using a blockchain platform. And every single party that is entitled to be getting some part of the contract are bound to be part of this platform. That way, this model is going to grow. This is what I perceive. Yes, please.
Hi, Saleem. Thanks for a great presentation. In your research, did you actually find anybody who's making a construction blockchain solution at the moment?
Within construction?
Yes.
We have seen one application here in the asset management. This has been developed by IBM, I think in 2016. I don't really know.
Related to hiring of equipment rather than physical construction of the elements.
In that sense, it's not truly the construction part, it's the asset management
I
part.
would agree this is part of the supply chain element.
Yeah. But in supply chain, I think if you talk about the 5 biggest areas that has been fast-paced adoption is taking place of blockchain, one is supply chain management. Supply chain management is not just limited to construction. It is across all industries together. But if most of the industries have proved that supply chain management has been successfully implemented blockchain solution, then hopefully construction will follow. But as we said, we are lazy starters, lagging behind all this.
I would agree with that.
We still have 2 minutes. You can take one more question if you like.
You mentioned in the presentation that by the year 2020, 100% of the contracts in Dubai will be based on blockchain. Does that include everything? Like Ripple, I know for instance, FAB has been using Ripple. What about the other currencies or blockchains, for instance? And another question would be, adopting the blockchain technologies, does that affect the cryptocurrencies that they're associated with, the value of the cryptocurrencies?
The second question again?
The second question being the adoption of blockchain technologies. The more they are adopted, does that affect the value of the cryptocurrencies, or is that completely irrelevant?
Well,
Are they comparable, or does it not work that way?
okay. Start from the first question. There was a blockchain summit sponsored by the Dubai government early this year, and we have seen the progresses of different government departments have made in adopting blockchain technology. I think Dubai Land Development and the Dubai Healthcare, Dubai Health Authority have made big progresses in adopting blockchain. Some of the other technologies, some of the other organizations are still following them. it's always like wait and watch. So one or two organizations will take the stride forward, and if they successfully implement, the rest will follow. So I believe, I think I should have made those slides here for the sake of information. They have already made a blueprint of how the implementation will take place at summits in 2020. Because 2020 is anyway, it's a big milestone by all reasons. So they have also included blockchain adaptation into that. The second one is about comparing the value of cryptocurrency. It is a totally different dynamics, and it's a completely different study about the pricing. It's more than technology. It has to be related with, just like the fluctuations in the stock market or the price of gold or other economic parameters. Yeah, okay. Thank you once again.